Boop. Ah. Yes, RB, we're already live, man. We're in.
Oh, we are. Okay.
Yeah, man. We're sliding in.
All right.
I just click go live. Like, let's just roll.
Let's do a show.
Let's do a show. Let me do my best Ross brand. Is TikTok, man, really about the government shutdown of free speech? Or is this really a threat to American democracy? We're going to find out what the top leaders in content creation think today at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time on the StreamLeader Report. But before that, let's do a show. Beep, 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 beep. Some intro music.
So I see you have a picture of our Congress in recess discussing things amongst themselves.
Wow, this is a little. What happens if I'm out here talking by myself for about 10 minutes? I have a little clip queued up from BoJack Horseman in which it's a supercut of all the times they say, "What is this, a crossover episode?" Today is a crossover episode for sure. You and I are companions on a wonderful journey called StreamLeader Report, weekly live panel show, and that's your show, baby. And this one is my show, baby, both on Thursdays. They kind of run back to back.
Right.
And we thought it would be super fun to do a crossover episode to ramp up into what is already turning out to be a politically charged topic of conversation for the StreamLeader Report. So tell the folks at home a little bit about the StreamLeader Report, why you created it, and why, and what's the vibe over there.
Yeah, we talk about issues that are of concern to creators, but also just issues that are affecting our world. And usually there's some overlap with social media or tech or live streaming podcasting, but not necessarily. Because, what doesn't touch online today? So after doing some episodes solo, and I still do an occasional one here and there solo, I decided to put together an all-star panel with Rebecca Gunter and Rob Greenlee and Claudia Santiago. And we've been doing the show, probably going on... not quite a year, but probably going on about 10 months or so, or 9 months.
It's close.
Yeah.
It's close. Why did you decide to do a panel show, RB? Like, that's the challenge. You've got to rally all your kittens in one box all the time.
I think people want to hang out with people. I mean, like when I started live streaming, I did all kind of interview shows. And, because I felt like, well, this is kind of social, right? It's not just broadcasting, it's social. And what a better way to facilitate conversation in the chat and conversation between episodes than to have conversations with people on the show. But the interview format, and I still do it and I still love it, and, for my other shows, but we've done that for so long now that hanging out with a panel with a group of people who are not only colleagues but friends and are open to sharing their thoughts and give and take and all that. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's a different kind of vibe from doing one person comes on, they're the expert, you interview them and you thank them, maybe you go solo, you give your opinion. This is it's sort of a shared endeavor, and we all kind of explore these issues. And like today is going to be in your wheelhouse. You're the TikTok expert on the panel, and I'm sure you have some very strong opinions about what's going on and what it means if TikTok is banned. I, on the other hand, I see both sides of this issue. I'm not trying to play it safe. I just really can see both sides of this issue, and I'm not sure what I think yet in terms of if I'm on one side or the other. I think there's neither side of this fight has necessarily conducted themselves. I
don't even know if it's one or if there's like just two sides. To me, it's very multifaceted. And I hear you, Ross. Like I'm really looking forward to your to your hot take on it, because the whole thing is just sus. But I also gravitate towards little chicken littling around conspiracy theories. They're too goddamn. Like I kind of get a little fist pumpy in the air about it.
Well, I think there's some of that. I think there's a lot of things that weigh in, and like everything else today, we have so much info and content coming at us, but sometimes I think the real story we're not getting on things. And so, what's really going on here behind the scenes? What is this really about?
I
A
know.
lot of the
What
things
is it
that
really
are being
about?
brought up have been issues for quite a while, and they've been cross-platform issues. So why now? Why this platform? On the other hand, I think some of the concerns about this platform versus other platform are certainly worth exploring and are not unjustified as far as the concerns that people have. So I'm really in the middle, and I don't have a strong, one side or the other, or if you say there are multiple sides, I'm not on multiple sides either.
You're a considered person who's taking a holistic perspective. I have a piece of media queued up, as you know I do.
Sure.
Let's go to TikTok for the real skinny. What do the TikTokers say? In answer to your question, why now? So this is just like one opinion, and when we kind of get into the panel show, I've got some other considered content for us to look at. But my opinion, like, let's ask TikTok what TikTok has to say about it. And here's one little opinion, not little, that's rude. Here's one opinion in which shared as to why now.
They try to scare people for doing this, but fuck it, who cares? They're banning TikTok, and I have a pretty good theory on why they're banning TikTok. So hear me out. So as y'all know, this is an election year, right? And if you think about it, the last election year was 2020. And in 2020, what did we have? We had COVID, so we was inside, and we had the BLM movement. Now, as you guys can remember, everything in that time that was going on made us seem like savages, made us seem like we were just going to stores stealing, and we were just trying to cause violence when people were trying to do a peaceful protest. I don't want to say how I feel about COVID, but also they got to control that as well. Most of that was on Twitter. Now in 2024, everybody uses TikTok, and you can't control what's on TikTok if China has control of it. So before we get into things and we get into that election, if you can take away something that can tell you the truth, and now you have full control over what is seen on social media, why wouldn't you do that? Again, I might just be talking like, I didn't graduate high school, I didn't graduate college or anything. I didn't do any of that. They try to scare people for doing this, but
anyway.
Well, I don't know what graduating high school or college has to do with it. I think it's not a completely unreasonable opinion, frankly. I think there's
we didn't need a disclaimer. I agree.
Yeah, I mean it's an election year and shit goes crazy during election years. I mean that's what we see, and much of what we see isn't. I think there's a lot below the surface. Now, what's interesting about this is generally election year, people are using the law to jockey for advantage. This seems to be a bipartisan effort. I don't know how the votes exactly broke down, but I know they were overwhelmingly in favor of the ban, and the House is almost divided down the middle. It's a little bit more Republican than Democrat, but not by much. So when you look at the number of votes, both parties are pretty much on board with this. I
would just argue, Ross, and I'm not trying to convince you to feel one way or another. I'm just really looking forward to our conversation. But I would argue that both parties could be considered maybe two sides of the same coin.
That is very possible.
That
is very possible. Although I don't know if they're good enough actors at this point.
Well,
really.
I mean, they are saying the quiet part out loud, just like we do on the StreamLeader Report weekly live panel show, Thursdays at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and also here on LinkedIn.
But the control thing that he mentioned, that is one of my theories from the beginning with this. That is, it's not about protecting our data. It's about why should China be able to run away with our data when our government needs it to track us, influence us, brainwash us, whatever. So there's that, right? This may not be such a noble enterprise, and that's one theory. But there's certainly things in the content, and there's certainly ways that ByteDance puts its finger on the algorithm and stuff that, you know, when our Constitution was written, nobody could imagine, you know. So there's a lot of things going on. But then there's also that with American social media platforms. We saw that with Twitter and many of the other things that have gone on, people being censored and topics being hidden.
That's another conversation that's really going around on TikTok, right? Like in the zeitgeist right now, is where are we all going? Where are we going after all of this? Because each platforms has its problems. You want to see another clip, Ross?
Absolutely.
What a segue! What a segue! Here we go.
We're banning this app because it's a danger to Americans. I would love to know why. We have reason to believe that this app has ties to communist China. What leads you to believe that this app has ties to communist China? It's owned and operated by a Chinese company. Since when do we care that something that we use was made by a Chinese company? When it's a social media app that's in direct competition with American social media apps. TikTok has successfully managed to pay more people for making content than any American app that's ever been created. Aren't you worried about the ties to communist China? Every goddamn thing that Americans use is somehow connected to China. But what if they're spying on you? There is not a piece of technology that Americans use that are not actively spying on them at all times. We've all agreed that this is what's best for you. We've all agreed that you don't care about what's best for us, and this is very clearly corporations trying to drive competition out of town. Does this mean it's going to be off of our phones tomorrow? No, we're giving the CEO a grace period to sell the company. When Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg aggressively acquire TikTok, what's the first course of action? How did you know that? You're the American government. You guys can't take a dump without an ulterior motive. Trust me, this is better for Americans. You guys literally fight tooth and nail to allow Christian evangelical terrorists to do literally whatever they want to whomever they want, and somehow TikTok is the problem. If they don't want to cut ties from communist China, they don't get to have our consumers. TikTok is a supplemental source of income for many, many Americans, and it's actively doing more to help Americans out in this time of economic crisis than their own country. But what about communism? I need you to do me a favor and define communism. It leads to government corruption and the abuse of power. That sounds a lot like American capitalism. You have more rights under American capitalism than you ever will under communism. If an American breaks a leg or passes out from a cancerous tumor, they literally risk financial ruin, but somehow you guys can't come to an agreement that that's a problem we should solve. La 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 la. Hi, we're
La 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 la. That's my favorite part. Anyway, to your point of the other platforms. Anyway, I played the incendiary clips on this show, Ross. Where
this just be straightforward. I agree with part of his argument. Part of what he said is insane, but like I agree with part of his argument.
Oops.
But the fact, I mean, yes, to the monopoly, we have problems with monopolies and too big to fail and all that kind of stuff in the U.S. There's no question that there's probably our well-paid lobbyists have been all over from all the major tech platforms going, get this competitor out because, you know, we're tired of having to come up with features to compete with it that nobody seems to like in comparison to how much they like TikTok. That part I agree with. You know, the terrorist thing and whatever, I think he went
I hear you, RB. I think that I don't think
he helps his argument with all that, but you know.
Sure. And I'm not trying to prove a point or use this as substantive evidence. It's just interesting to me, the conversation within TikTok and how people are using kind of these TikTok trends to open up a conversation. Again, we're gonna see all kinds of outrageous claims. It's TikTok, but that is kind of one of the things I love about it more than anything is it's all unfiltered, and I think it would be erroneous for me to be like, everybody understands what it is, that you have to make a decision as to whether or not you trust it or you don't. We're kind of back to the trust factor.
Right.
And it's probably not true. I'm sure that there are a lot of creators out there who have maybe some sort of a agenda or, some kind of a affiliation that they're not being totally transparent about. However, for the most part, it's such like chaotic postmodernism that you just have to decide for yourself what's worth keeping and what's worth throwing away. And if we don't have that platform anymore, then it feels like everything has a secret agenda in some kind of way.
This may not be a reason why you should ban it, but if the argument is that one of the arguments is that a quote unquote enemy government is able to do unfiltered propaganda through the algorithm, whatever, and you're making the argument that TikTok is not a threat, maybe you shouldn't be doing Chinese Communist Party propaganda in that argument would be helpful. He could not possibly go to China and do a video like that criticizing the Chinese government. That's not. There's still differences. they're not as wide as we wish that they were, or that we pretend that they are, but there's still differences. And I think he hurt his argument a little bit with that. But the basic idea of monopoly and the power, unconstrained power of American tech companies in America and around the world is a concern. And people have talked about maybe Meta should be broken up into different pieces so that there's more ability for smaller platforms to evolve and compete. TikTok wasn't supposed to come out of nowhere and be this next big platform, right? We already had our established platforms that had their roles, right? And TikTok kind of burst that bubble that they had.
God, I love a disruptor. I love a disruptor. And this was an incendiary clip, RB, and it got you talking for sure. I appreciate how much you're willing to, I don't know, go there about TikTok with me on our pregame show.
Yeah, again, I see both sides of it, and I guess it's like I totally like, I don't buy that the government is trustworthy, that our government is telling us the truth about any of this stuff, that our companies have our interests. And I also think that, like he said, there's hardly a thing that we do that isn't touched by China.
I thought that was the most interesting point. We can let them
make our medicine. We can let them make our masks. We can let them make our COVID tests. We can let them do everything you can think of that's essential to our health and well-being. It probably is manufactured at some stage in China, and yet somehow this social media app is the one where other politicians and corporations that are otherwise 100% in on the open the door to China policy that's been going on for 30, 40 years is now this is where they draw the line. This can't be the only threat that's going on, right? Like, so
man, you popped off about that. Exactly. Like, I thought that was the most interesting.
So that's the part that I kind of agree with him on. But the moral equivalency stuff is, isn't helpful to the argument.
It's not helpful, but it is a conversation. I mean, I guess it's like TikTok proving TikTok's value to me. Maybe I'm looking for it, but that you can have unfiltered conversations in the palm, and just in the palm of your hand, first person perspective, without. And then it's up to us to decide what part of that is worth thinking about and what it's not. It sparked this conversation,
yeah,
which I think is pretty cool.
Well, and I think it's the power of these clips that you bring and you select when we talk about TikTok and other subjects. It's a rich place to pull from, and these are really thought provoking. And I think they just add a lot to the show, like as far as thinking in terms of live streaming and video and stuff. Having clips, it just adds. It makes the show feel bigger. It makes it feel more voices and movement. It's just everything about it. I'm not really able to put it into words exactly, but everything about it just adds to the show and adds a lot of life to it.
Well, that's your stream leadership, if you will. Because you were encouraging folks to bring some piece of media, and a flat article to be like, oh, I found this article is certainly a worthwhile piece of content to consider. But these just kind of give it a little bit of color to
right
all the things. And you didn't enroll me in the panel show to be like, we need a TikTok expert or a resident TikTok person.
I don't even think I knew you were a TikTok person at that point.
It just started emerging, and I'm an aficionado. I've never posted one time. If you go to my profile, I have zero content there. I'm a consumer of it more than anything, but I do consume it through the lens of dissent and conversation, creativity, first-person POV, micro communities, how we learn from each other. Somebody called it video Twitter, and I thought that was very interesting. So. I just happen to love that platform.
Yeah, I spend very little time on the platform. I got to be honest. Occasionally I post something that I post on, the other short form video features of YouTube and Instagram and so forth, but I don't spend a lot of time on TikTok. But as far as a topic of conversation, as far as like what's going on in our world and what's going on in the creator community and where the future's going, this issue of TikTok has been a very important one to our show because it really brings together a lot of important issues that cover all of social media, but they're playing out with TikTok because that's the one that people are talking about banning, or the one that people are more devoted to in a lot of ways. That's where things are more unfiltered. But I don't know it well enough to know, are there certain areas that you can't touch on TikTok? Well,
there certainly are word bans, and we're cognizant of that, on the StreamLeader Report, which has actually brought up this super interesting evolution of culture for me, to watch language evolve based on what an algorithm will trigger as being, an undesirable behavior. So, right. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it here on the show. I'm going to do it. Okay. So, in TikTok, the word or the language around suicide or murder is unalive. Well, I'm sure people have heard it. It's been in the pop culture for a while. Yeah. And I think that that's really, really interesting, is to watch the language evolve and how we understand it change based on just how the algorithm is forcing us to do it. So that's super interesting.
The R word for
yep,
assault, a certain type of assault is one.
It's a small globular piece of fruit that comes on a vine, and if you dry it in the sun, it becomes a raisin, and if you ferment it in a barrel or steel casks, it becomes wine.
So yeah, there's yeah, I mean it's funny because these words that are banned to keep away content that could be harmful to people, or content that the government doesn't want us talking about, or other powers that be, the platforms, it's really changing the language, and it's also narrowing how deeply people can get into these topics, because you're constantly self-censoring in a way around those topics, because you know that if we were to have a completely take the gloves off and have a completely unfiltered conversation about one of those topics that we were just alluding to, at some point we're going to slip up and just say what we call it in regular conversation, and so it makes you not go there on certain issues, and issues like people being unalived and people being assaulted in ways and so forth are important issues in our society that we need to address. I mean, we should be able to talk about those issues. I mean, those are things people need to be aware of, to be protected from, to know how to avoid, to know where they can get help. But it takes all that completely off the table in a way, because you're trying just to tiptoe around it, and your audience knows when you say unalive or self-deleted what you're referring to, but you know that you're getting off of that subject quicker because you don't want to step on the wrong thing, or you don't want to stay on it long enough where you say something else that triggers your channel getting, demonetized, or it, getting sort of delisted in the algorithm or whatever, shadow banned. So,
and what it says about us and our larger culture, I believe that the more euphemisms we have for a word, the more we're uncomfortable with it, or it causes some sort of cultural angst or anxiety. So we're just adding to the lexicon, and we're kind of lifting up our own apron and showing our own vulnerabilities and insecurities.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of words that now we use that are supposed to mean something different, but they really mean the same thing, but they kind of nice it up for a word that we previously used. And of course, that game never ends if you really stick at it, because long enough, when everybody knows what you're talking about, then you've got to move it to another term, right? Like
Ixnay on the ode K.
Like handicap became disabled, which became differently abled, became... But then there's other terms like for different mental health conditions where people use, and I know you've used it, neurodivergent. That's actually, I think, a really important descriptive term that pinpoints things better than saying mental health or
exactly
emotional challenges or whatever, where we categorize those type of things with these labels that don't necessarily accurately indicate what the cause of them is or how they manifest themselves. So like neurodivergent, I think is actually a very effective way to talk about things that takes off some of these
stigma,
pinpoint, stickers that don't necessarily even identify what is caught. I mean, they don't even know what causes. You know what I mean? The theory keeps changing every 20 years on how we approach these things and how we treat them and all that kind of stuff. And if they're problems, some are not even problems. Some are, bigger problems
superpowers.
Than we knew. Right. And so I think there's an instance where a term came up, and I'm like, yeah, that's actually a better term than what we've been using. But too often it's, terrorist becomes militant becomes, gunman, becomes
troubled child,
advocate, confused. Becomes, then you get things like the alleged gunman, instead of the alleged terrorist, the alleged gunman, and there's a picture of the guy holding a gun, shooting it, and it's like the alleged gunman because we're using gunman instead of either terrorist or militant, right? So
because terrorists only look a certain way,
right? Absurdo world.
I'd like you to know that we also say neurospicy, neurodivergent circles, like little.
I never heard that one.
Neurospicy. Another thing I think, Ross, about language as well is the opposite effect. I just saw TikTok yesterday in which the creator was talking about emotional vulnerability as being language that actually kind of put a fear framework around it, was advocating for saying emotional intimacy or emotional transparency, which is more neutral and healthy and sustainable versus vulnerability, which feels like, kind of a scary or an unwell place to be, where transparency is an achievable kind of like indicator of health and wellness. And we could see that change over the course of the next couple of months as more and more people talk about it. And the reason they have a platform to talk about it in real time where I could hear her opinion like that was because of TikTok. So rally.
Now, have you looked for some of that content on Instagram?
I mean, what I get on Instagram Reels, first of all, acknowledging we're going slightly over time, Ross, for your
five tips to improve your likes on your Instagram Reels or whatever is what you get a lot of. Of course, you get that on TikTok too, but
I feel like on Reels and particularly on Facebook, the content is very, very coded, like cis heteronormativity, lots of like just aggrandizing like a family unit and a lot of consumerism. So I feel like those platforms are really kind of putting content that's really starting to kind of like pedestals ways of life, where TikTok is more kind of like, Skittles versus.
So you feel like everybody's got a home on TikTok?
Yeah, I do feel like people have a
or
home
the
on
further
TikTok.
out, the further out of the mainstream you are, the more welcome, the more you feel at home on TikTok. Maybe, I don't know.
I think that because the algorithm is like unbelievable, that I don't even know how it's tracking. I can't wait to hear what Rob Greenlee says about how TikTok is like creating the algorithm, but it is almost like micro corrections from like just a fraction of information of how long you're staying on a video, you're engaging with it, do you let it play again, that it just tailors your feed. So if you're the kind of person who likes outrageous statements or to have incendiary content like the one we just looked at where you were like, whoa, Jesus, then it's going to show up in your feed. If you're the kind of person who like really likes seeing how many different dance varieties they are to the new Beyonce Western country crossover song, you're going to get a lot more of that. And you're going to get other, I don't know, maybe other dance feeds or things like
and in
along
general,
that
that's
genre.
kind of consistent across all the platforms. Whatever you look at, you're going to get more of.
It seems like TikTok is much more ramped up in its ability to do that in micro increments that feel seamless. Rather than a really good example is the country musician Jelly Roll, who I'd never heard of before 6 months ago, and then one day was in my feed every fifth or seventh video. One day it was all Jelly Roll and Bunny XO all day, every day, and I'd never heard of him yesterday. So I start thinking, like, is that an algorithm? Probably not. I don't even follow country music. Or is it that the Jelly Roll team just put a lot of money into paid social media placement? Whereas TikTok, I kind of trust the algorithm is responding to me more than I worry. Not worry, I think, is this because the algorithm is tweaking or because somebody just sunk a bunch of money into ad placement? I don't know. It's good content, though. Team Jelly Roll for the content.
All right.
Very interesting. I'd like to thank our comment guests who came by to see us today.
Yes.
I did them a small disservice by not shouting them out in the middle of the show, a la Ross Brand style. But thank you to Tony in Silver Spring and Kathleen in Canada for coming by and spending time with us in the comments and asking such excellent questions. Tony wants an apron with your face on it. So that's going to be the new StreamLeader Report merch.
That'll be the next piece of merch coming out of the Livestream Universe headquarters.
Exactly. Don't forget how we're getting a cruise ship and all the things.
That's right.
I encourage anybody who is watching this live broadcast or in the replay to just set your clocks for 25 minutes forward. Well, we'll do this whole conversation with our two other co-panelists, Rob Greenlee and Claudio Santiago, on the StreamLeader Report weekly live show, 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. That's an every Thursday thing, but today it's about TikTok. Ross, where else can people find you?
They can find me at youtube.com/@livestreamuniverse. That's where we do the shows. You can also come right back here on the Stone Fruit channel and watch the show as well. And you
Simultaneous.
can also connect with me at Ross Brand on LinkedIn.
Oh my God, LinkedIn's your new place. Will you come
Yeah.
back and tell us how it's going on LinkedIn?
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
future?
we'll do a LinkedIn show sometime.
That's good. I like to talk about LinkedIn, even though I'm always like, All right, RB. Thanks for jumping on the fly. This was a really fun crossover episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure. I would risk copyright infringement by playing us out by little Bojack Supercut. So everybody go check that out on YouTube. And we will have more crossover at 1:30. Thanks,
All
RB.
right. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. I wish I had an outro like you.